Hello, hello, and welcome to podcast number 5 of The Normal Intuitive. My name is Nancy. Thank you so much for joining me. If you're joining me for the first time, thank you very much for tuning in. Let me give you a quick little background on who I am and what I do. First and foremost, I am a psychic medium. That means I can connect with people that have passed on. It runs in my family. I've been a psychic medium all my life, but only recently did I start doing readings professionally for clients. I have a website, one-question.net. That's one spelled out. You can reach me on Facebook at facebook.com/one question at a time. That's one spelled out again. And on Instagram, the number one question at a time. In addition to being a psychic medium, I am a wife of 11 years and I am a mom to 2 living children, and I am a stay-at-home mom. And I started this podcast and I started my blog, etc., because I wanted to give an insight on what it's like to be a normal 30-something woman that's struggling with the same things that we all seem to be struggling with, but I have this unique insight of also being a psychic medium. And I'd like to kind of dispel some of the myths of what a psychic is and isn't, and what to look out for, and etc. And just as I've said, I have 2 cats and 2 dogs because this dog continues to open this door to my office. So you will hear me closing that door because, of course, as a stay-at-home mom, everything happens all the time. And the last couple of podcasts, I've been doing a mom confession. So I'm going to give you my mom confession for the podcast. And that is that last night, after we caught the kids playing on their new Amazon Echo past their bedtime, we decided to take away screens for the entire week. And my son right now is watching TV so I can do the podcast. And I told him to keep it a secret from his sister. He's not going to keep it a secret from his sister. He's 4. And so we're going to see how well this goes. I think he'll probably tell her within 10 minutes of her getting home from school, but we can hope for better. And on that note, what we're going to talk about today is something I've blogged quite a bit about, and that's the idea of pronoia, which is the idea of the universe working in our favor. Now, I doubt that the universe might help interject in this situation with maybe keeping this a secret, because this isn't something that I'm especially proud of right now, but it's something I need to do if I want to get this podcast out. But the idea of pronoia, if you're unfamiliar, is exactly the opposite of paranoia. So instead of thinking that people are out to get you or thinking that everyone is working against you, pronoia is the idea that the universe is working in your favor if you only acknowledge it. Now, this is extending on from the last podcast number 4, when I talk about taking risks. So if you haven't listened to podcast number 4, go ahead, stop this podcast right now, listen to podcast number 4. It's 22 minutes long, and it talks about when you're taking risks, how you can know you're going in the right direction. And I said you can ask for signs, and you'll receive these signs that you're going in the right direction. Well, extending from that for pronoia is that when you're getting these signs, you just continue to follow the universe's lead. And by acknowledging the universe and acknowledging that the universe is working in your favor, because as Sylvia Browne, and I'm going to quote Sylvia Browne a lot, I followed her when she was alive quite immensely, is she talked about the fact that God loves to be acknowledged, and acknowledging the fact that they are working in your life. And I'm going to say they, but however you refer to God or the universe. But people at home, heaven, like to be acknowledged. And so when you acknowledge them, when you see a penny on the ground and say, thank you so much, God, not only are they hearing you, but they're going to continue to acknowledge you and continue to help you because you are acknowledging their presence. So it's simply the idea of almost like following breadcrumbs. Because you find one breadcrumb, you're going to find another. Now, a rational person is going to say, you are making this happen. And my response to that is, does it make any difference? Does it make any difference if this is simply your mind creating this or not? Because it's still doing good and it's still allowing you to pursue good. And as long as that's the true intention, who the heck cares if it is God, which I believe it is, and from my experience is, or it's just our mind. Our mind is so powerful. So if it is our mind, that's awesome. But we're still creating good, and we're still creating the things we want in our life. And it's entirely possible, but we have to believe. And this goes back to faith. On the last podcast, I addressed that I was very worried about taking a certain risk that I felt like the universe was throwing at me to take this risk. And sometimes I admit I do say, do as I say, not as I do, because I was very worried about taking this risk. Again, I'm pretty normal. I'm intuitive. I'm not intuitive about myself, but I just felt like the universe was pushing me to do this thing. And unfortunately, I couldn't reveal it. Well, now I can, and I'm very excited to let everyone know that June 28th through the 30th, I am going to be in Chicago, in the Windy City, for in-person readings. So if you are interested in an in-person reading and you are going to be in the Chicago area or you live in the Chicago area, please head on over to my website at one-question.net. That's one spelled out. And I have a page dedicated to Chicago. We are still working on locations for the actual 30-minute readings, but the hour-long readings that are going to be available on Sunday, and they're getting snapped up quick, are going to be downtown at the Hyatt Regency so far, unless we find that more people are coming from the north or South Chicago, then we might adjust the hotel a little bit. But right now, I'm going to be in downtown Chicago, the 28th through the 30th of June. So please, if you're in the area, please check me out. But this was a risk that I was very fearful to take because I kept feeling like the universe was going, you need to go out to Chicago. You need to go out to Chicago. And I was just like, what the heck, universe? And I kind of chatted with a few clients that I've become close to over in the Chicago area. And everyone was very supportive and encouraging about the idea. And I said, okay, I have to take this risk. I'm going to jump, like we talked about in the last episode, podcast number 4, about you have to be willing to jump. Now, I looked up this quote this morning, and there's a disagreement on who this quote is attributed to, Michael Jordan or Wayne Gretzky. But they say you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. And in business, I've heard something similar, which is you've never heard of a business becoming profitable by spending less money. And those two quotes together really basically say that sometimes it's going to take a little money in your risk, or sometimes it's going to take just a huge jump to get where you need to go, but you have to be willing to take risks. If you read the autobiographies and the biographies of people that have been successful, it's all risks. And think of anyone that you look up to and ask them. Not one of them has not taken a risk. It's all about risk, but risk is unfounded if you don't have the belief in pronoia. If you have the belief in pronoia that the universe is working in your favor, then the idea of risk is a lot less scary. So if you believe that the universe is working in your favor, and this is kind of what I was thinking about in terms of the Chicago, is let's say it's a bomb. Let's say people really don't book me for Chicago. Then worst comes to worst, I fly out to Chicago and have a wonderful weekend in Chicago. That's the worst case scenario for me. Now think about a risk that you're thinking about taking. Maybe it's having a reading with me. What's the worst case scenario? Maybe you have a fun hour. Maybe you get some insight into yourself. Maybe you learn what you don't want, or maybe you learn that you don't ever want to have a reading again. I highly doubt that. I've not had one client that has said that, but the worst case scenario is you get nothing out of it. Best case scenario, your whole life can change. And I have seen that again and again and again with clients. I have seen clients do a 180 after talking to me, and I'm not taking the credit at all. I give all of this credit to God and the messages I'm getting from God. But all of those clients that have had that 180 degree turn, and I talked about this in an earlier podcast, took the risk of having a reading with me. And they also subscribed to the belief in pronoia because they came into the reading and they believed that this was where they were supposed to be. Now, I know it's hard when you are in a difficult place in your life and we talked about this on the last podcast, when you feel stuck and maybe you're helping other people in that process. But just because you feel stuck does not mean that the universe is not working in your favor. Ask the universe for a sign and believe, truly believe, that the universe is working in your favor. I remember when I first learned about this idea of Pronoia a couple of years ago, before I started practicing, officially as a psychic medium. I remember I was reading the book and I thought, for one day, I thought, what the heck? I'm going to subscribe to this belief. All day today, I'm going to have the belief that the universe is working in my favor. So I think I was running errands and I was driving, and all of a sudden I got stuck at a stoplight. And in the past, I might have been like, what the heck? I've got to go pick up my prescriptions. I've got to do this. I got to do that. And instead, I actually kind of laughed and I said, oh, I must need to be at this light. Okay. And then I continued on my day. And every time there was something maybe a little bit trying or irritating, I reminded myself of the belief that this was actually the universe working for me. And at the very least, at the end of the day, I was less stressed. I was less irritated at, the everyday nuances of life. And at the very worst, there was this building of faith, thinking maybe things are not as bad as they seem, and maybe the universe is helping me. Now, I know it seems relatively minor thinking about a stoplight, but you have to start small. You can't, it would be easy. I remember when I was Catholic, so that should give you a clue where I'm going. When I was Catholic, I would say, God, if you're real, you're going to get me a puppy, or you're going to do this or whatever. And when you ask God for these grandiose things, get me $1 million, it's kind of like asking that. Like, what do you think God's going to do? God's going to say no. God's going to say, why do you need that $100 million? It's silly. It's asinine. But if you simply say, I'm going to trust God in where you're leading me today, that's an easy thing for God to do. Now, I 100% believe that God can move mountains. I have no doubt in my mind that God can move mountains. However, if I tell God to move a mountain, do you really think that God's going to do that? No, God's not going to move a mountain for me. But if I ask God for a little simple thing or idea, or just trust that the universe is going to lead me where I need to go, and maybe it's not where I think it's originally going to be. Trust me, when I started this website after a 3 a.m. idea a couple of months ago, I had no idea where this was taking me. It was so scary. I thought I was risking money on building a website. I thought for sure I was just going to go broke in, spending money for things. But I trusted God, and I trusted that wherever this was going, it was going to lead me somewhere. Now, I didn't expect it to lead me here. I would have never, if you told me back in December that I would be doing a podcast and I would be going to Chicago in a couple months, I would say you're absolutely crazy. But that's the really wonderful thing about life, is when you trust God to take the wheels, or the universe. This is sounding very Christian. I apologize. If you trust God, Muhammad, whoever, to take the wheels of your life, just amazing things start happening. But we have this need to control. And I think it's kind of a woman thing. I mean, I see men doing it, but I think because a lot of my clients are women, I see women having this need to control things. When they come for a reading, women go, okay, I need to know this. I want to do this. And then I might have a message that is very different from what they need or want. And I can almost see them in their brain, like trying to comprehend this or try and figure out how they can still control this and get what they want. As women, we especially with children, gosh, I mean, we absolutely have no control over our children, don't we? Like, we absolutely have no control. We have no idea. My son could be throwing up in the next minute. I don't know. And because we feel so out of control with our children and maybe even our spouses, because let's be honest, after you've been married 11 years, I mean, sometimes marriage is hard and difficult, and I love my husband, but oh my gosh, Like, so much of my life is out of my control. Not to mention I'm a military spouse. So let's talk about